The date is the 2nd of April, 1982. On a remote set of islands in the South Atlantic Ocean, the last invasion of British territory by a foreign power took place. The Falkland Islands is a group of islands 300 miles off the coast of South America and consists of two main land masses, West Falkland and East Falkland. The terrain of the islands is mostly mountainous and hilly, with a cold, windy, and humid climate. So just like home then for the British. For nearly 2 centuries, both the United Kingdom and Argentina have laid claim to the Falkland Islands, with the Argentinians, who refer to the Falkland Islands as Islas Malvinas, controlling the islands for nearly a decade, until in 1833 the British expelled them. The British Foreign Office had long considered handing over control of the islands to Argentina. However, the people of the Falklands, proud of their British identity, did not wish to lose it, making talks between Argentina and Britain fruitless. December 1981 saw a change in regime for Argentina, bringing General Leopoldo Galtieri into office. The Galtieri regime was one of terror for the Argentinian people and faced numerous economic problems, meaning by early 1982, Galtieri's regime was facing mass protest and civil unrest. Hoping to mobilize the long-standing patriotic feelings that the Argentinian people held for the islands and divert public attention from the country's economic problems, Galtieri chose what any good military dictator does: settle the question by military force. In a surprise amphibious landing on the 2nd of April, known to the Argentinians as Operation Rosario, Argentine Marines captured the capital of the Falklands, Port Stanley, after overwhelming the token force of 69 Royal Marines and forcing the governor of the islands, Rex Hunt, to surrender. Following the surrender, the remaining Royal Marines and governor were escorted off the island and sent back to Britain. When the news broke in the Argentine capital of Buenos Aires on the afternoon of the 2nd of April, 200,000 people took to the streets to celebrate the recapture of the Malvinas. However, Galtieri, who assumed the British would not bother to recapture the islands, had seriously underestimated the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher. Britain's first female Prime Minister took a defiant stance against the invasion and immediately called an emergency session of Parliament. Here, the Iron Lady announced that a large task force totaling 127 ships, at the heart of which will be 2 aircraft carriers, HMS Invincible and HMS Hermes, and that it would set sail to the Falkland Islands to retake them. Being 8,000 miles from Britain, it would take the task force 3 weeks to reach the Falkland Islands. This, as you can probably guess, is a logistical nightmare for the British Army. So, the British planned to use Ascension Island, which is the halfway point from Britain to the Falklands, as a jumping off point and a base of operations for their campaign. Seeing the British military response, the Argentines reinforced the garrison in the Falkland Islands until their garrison numbered 13,000 men. 2,000 of these men were deployed on West Falkland, while the other 11,000 men were deployed on East Falkland. All the Argentine troops could do now was dig in and wait for the inevitable British attack. On May 1st, 1982, with the British task force 100 miles off the northeast of the Falklands, the battle began. The first clash of this undeclared war came in the air, as the new British Sea Harriers came head-to-head with the Argentine Mirage 3s. Despite being the underdog in this air war, the British were immediately able to show that they were a force to be reckoned with. While the war in the air raged on, the focus of the war soon shifted from the skies down to the stormy seas of the South Atlantic. To the northwest of the task force, a cluster of Argentine naval vessels, including an aircraft carrier, were heading towards the British task force. However, more worryingly to the British was another group of ships to the south of the Falklands, the cruiser General Belgrano and two destroyers. All three of these ships were armed with the lethal, ship-killing Exocet missiles. The Argentine Navy seemed to be attempting a pincer maneuver against the British task force from the northwest and from the south. However, the British were prepared, and the Belgrano group was being tailed by the British submarine, HMS Conqueror. After being advised of the threat the Belgrano group posed, the Prime Minister ordered the Conqueror to attack. Within 45 minutes of being hit by the Conqueror's torpedoes, the Belgrano had sunk, taking 323 members of its crew down below the icy depths of the South Atlantic. Fearing more submarine attacks, the Argentinian Navy returned home, scoring the British their first major victory of the conflict. However, the sinking of the Belgrano proved to be controversial, as it was outside the exclusion zone. This victory, however, was short-lived, when, on the 4th of May 1982, an Argentinian fighter managed to sink the first British ship since World War II, the HMS Sheffield, using an air standoff version of the Exocet ship-killing missiles. The sinking of the HMS Sheffield claimed 20 members of her crew and injured another 24. The sinking of the Sheffield had a profound impact on the British public, as they now realised that the Falkland crisis had become, as the BBC put it, an actual shooting war. In preparation for the amphibious assault on San Carlos Bay, the British's chosen site, an SAS raid took place on Pebble Island, clearing out Argentinian defences, and the HMS Alacrity sailed between East and West Falklands, clearing out all Argentine supply ships. In the early hours of May 21st, the landings at San Carlos Bay began, as 3,000 British troops landed on the shores of San Carlos Bay and by dawn had established a firm beachhead. The landings, however, were not unopposed, as the Argentine air forces continued their relentless air campaign, managing to sink 5 British ships and damage 2 between the 21st and 24th of May, leaving the British task force to nickname San Carlos Bay as Bomb Alley. After all this, the British forces advanced on Goose Green. Early on the 27th of May, British 2 Power, with naval and artillery support, attacked Goose Green, which was held by the Argentine 12th Infantry Regiment. The fighting was tough and lasted till the morning of the 28th of May, when the British finally captured the town. In the battle, 17 British and 47 Argentinian soldiers were killed, and 961 Argentines taken as prisoners of war by the British. The taking of Goose Green allowed the British to break out of their San Carlos beachhead and begin their advance on the capital of Port Stanley. The next major victory for the British came in the form of the SAS capture of Mount Kent, which was a strategic high position which overlooked the capital of Port Stanley after an intense fight with the Argentinian Special Forces there. The 1st of June saw the arrival of 5,000 more British troops and the drawing of plans for the final offensive of the war, which planned to take Port Stanley. On the night of the 11th of June, the British forces launched an attack on a string of hills and high ground surrounding Port Stanley. Supported by naval and artillery gunfire once again, they simultaneously attacked Mount Harriet, Two Sisters, and Mount Longdon. The fight for Mount Longdon was the fiercest out of the 3, but the British forces, stalwart and well motivated, pushed forward. With the momentum of the initial assaults maintained by the British forces, They were able to take the high ground surrounding Port Stanley on the 13th of June, taking the last natural line of defence, Mount Tumbledown. On the 14th of June 1982, a ceasefire was declared when the commander of the Argentine garrison in Stanley, Brigadier General Mario Menendez, surrendered to Major General Jeremy Moore, officially ending the Falklands War. The Falklands War raged for 2 months and cost the lives of 225 British and 649 Argentinian soldiers. Today, Argentina still claims the islands as a sovereign territory, even having it written into its constitution. But in 2013, a referendum held on the sovereignty of the islands saw the islanders voting overwhelmingly to remain British, with only 3 voting against.